Recently on the channel, I've gotten to show you some really amazing ancient Central and South American stone maces, and now we're going to look at the final one, for now anyway. It comes from Peru, just like the last one, and yeah, ancient Peru has some really neat designs, some very cool stuff, like this set of mummies in a mountain cliffside by a people that the Incas called the Warriors of the Clouds, the Chachapoya. Speaking of the Inca, here's the mace head we saw from them last time. Copper and silver mixed together, a copper-silver alloy, making it, as I said, one of the rarest weapons you'll ever see. It's in the real classic star-shaped formation, so I had to show you this variation since I didn't last time. Really more of an axe, so that's interesting. Here's some just random pictures of Peru. It had various ancient peoples, and we're going to get to see something from one of the pre-Inca civilizations today. The Salinar. They were kind of a transition people, although they lasted for, that culture was a transition, but it lasted for about like 500 to 800 years, basically around the turn of the millennium. They were pretty scattered people, small settlements, but they did have some big centers with stone fortifications, similar to the ones we're looking at in these images. Here's where they were located. They were a coastal people, so just to give you an idea. A little side note on some of their practices, since we started with a funerary image in this video, the corpses in graves almost always had a gold foil in the mouth. Interesting little practice there, but we are here to look at this. So this is a flanged mace, but it's made out of stone, making it a pretty rare item, I would say. Stone maces are one of the most common weapons throughout all of history, depending on how you want to define stone mace, but a flanged mace usually makes us think, and with a good reason, of something like this. Here's a European example. Here's a Russian one, also on the ornate side, but we get the initial idea pretty easily, right? You're reducing the surface area for impact and doing it around the entire circumference. There's an Indo-Persian one. Notice the handguard on it, that's a telltale sign. Never seems to have caught on in other places. It makes a lot of sense to me. It seems really practical. But you're reducing the surface area all around so that it doesn't matter what side you hit with. And the bottom line is that we usually think of metal when we think of flanged maces. So, they started as something like this. Isn't that a wicked-looking weapon? But all I mean to imply here is, the steel ball, iron ball, and metal is nice and malleable, so of course you can make the flanges. Now, originally, maces were something like this. This is actually pretty gorgeous, too. But anyway, this is a Neolithic mace head. And it should be noted, a round spherical shape does a pretty great job of reducing the surface impact as well. Here's an Egyptian one. I've talked about how this was a primary infantry weapon for a long time in ancient Egypt, and here's an actual example. And you can tell right there by the outline, the part you strike with is going to be a reduced surface. It's going to focus the impact pretty well. Now, speaking of that, here's one from kind of the Stonehenge area and a time frame, and you can see they shaped it to get even more of a reduction. So it's much more of an ovoid. But at some point realized, why not carve into the rock, and you get something like a transition from the items at the bottom here to the one at the top. And these are from Peru, by the way, just like the item that we're looking at today. Funny enough, that classic star-shaped Inca stone mace head that we're looking at in focus now is a more primitive design than the one we're looking at today, even though this one here was fashioned long, long before the Inca Empire. And I think the easiest assumption to make is that it's just easier to crank out models like the one we saw a second ago versus this, and overall the effectiveness was about the same. Or at least not so different as to make it worth the extra effort. Who knows? I'd rather fight with this one, if it were me. You can see with this view, it's basically like an axe blade, a pretty dull axe blade, but still an axe-shaped blade coming at you. But when you're trying to outfit a whole army, time and investment matters. This configuration here took a lot of work to make. I mean, it's a work of art, not dissimilar to this green jade mace head that I showed a while back. Not to the same degree, of course, but it is interesting that the Salinar classic mace head is aesthetically pleasing and definitely has purely visual considerations. These were an artistic people known for their pottery. Here's one example. And there are features on this mace head that are purely decorative and took a long time to carve and chip and polish. If you were only carving down the stone to make the weapon more effective, you'd end up with something more like this, right? This is very utilitarian. Also looks great, but You know, nobody took extra time to make this look impressive. How good it looks is mostly a byproduct of its function. And you can't say the same about our specimen, our Salinar specimen, because look at these spikes in between the actual blades, if you will. We're looking at a different specimen than the one I got to see, by the way, here. Those don't really serve a functional purpose, I'm pretty sure. But they were always included, seemingly always included, when these were made. So here they're very soft, but notice the artist, the weapon maker, felt he still had to include those. Like I said, this clearly was a common configuration because you're about to see several examples. This one here does look like it might have been whacked against things more than a few times in battle. You're noticing, I'm sure, the differences in stone and color. These were typically made out of diorite, a very hard type of igneous rock found in Peru. And the durability, the hardness would really matter because once you create this flanged shape, you're risking breakage, right? Unless it's a really tough stone, you wouldn't want to carve this deep and make blades that narrow. And now we're back to our example. You notice the difference, like here, the walls, if you will, are not as thick as in that previous example, that picture, where the haft goes in. So definitely some variation in construction, but clearly this was a design that they really liked. Notice the attachment method to the haft seems to be just inserting the haft in there. I don't know if maybe they use some kind of gummy mixture to help it adhere. I have no idea, but you would obviously make sure you had a really solid fit. Here on the right, I'm just going to show you just a thumbnail because it's a very low-res picture. If I blow it up, it looks terrible in the video, but you'll see some related flanged stone shapes from obviously the same part of the world and same material. Going back to the material density, maybe that's why they went with this design here and why it's so rare in world history, because you'd have to have that kind of stone that could stand up to battle when in this shape with those thin, you know, like fins. You can see the actual chip marks there. That was some hard work done long ago. So like I said, actually a very rare weapon type when you think about it. And a specimen of it that is about 2,000 years old. Thanks a lot.